Alright guys, today we're going to talk about domains and kingdoms. These are the two largest levels of classification. Domain is the broadest and then comes kingdom. When we talk about classifying domains and kingdoms, there are three criteria that we use and how we place them in which domain or which kingdom. And they are the cell type. Is this cell a prokaryote or is it a eukaryote? And we'll talk about that in a second. How do they make their food? Are they autotrophs or are they heterotrophs? And then lastly, the number of cells in their body. Are they unicellular or multicellular? So these are the three ways that three criteria that we will use to classify organisms into the correct domain and kingdom. First domain we'll talk about is bacteria. Bacteria are prokaryotes. Prokaryotes are cells that have no nucleus. They are very simple, primitive cells. They are not complex. And if we say a prokaryotic cell, we're talking about a cell with no nucleus. Bacteria, their cells can also be autotrophs or heterotrophs. Some can make their own food, some get their food or energy elsewhere. The next domain is called archaea. These are also prokaryotes. Again, prokaryotic cells are cells that have no nucleus. They're unicellular. They're very, very simple, not complex. The cells in this domain can be autotrophs or heterotrophs as well. Now, archaea is defined by living in harsh conditions. Some of these can live in volcanic vents where the temperature is extremely high, or in the Dead Sea where there's so much salt that the only thing you have living is these very primitive single-celled organisms called archaea. They're different from bacteria because they have a little bit different chemical makeup in their DNA and their genes. But again, archaea are also prokaryotic, which means they're unicellular, they have no nucleus in their cells. The last domain is called eukarya, and this is the domain where we belong. They're called eukaryotes or eukaryotic cells, and these are organisms that have cells that contain a nucleus. They're more complex, and again, when we say eukaryote, it's cells that have a nucleus. So any organism that has cells with a nucleus would be in this domain. Now, because this domain is so large and so broad, we break this domain down into four major kingdoms. And those kingdoms are protists, fungi, plants, and animals. The protist kingdom we call the odds and ends kingdom. If a scientist can't really figure out where to place an organism, they just toss it in this grouping or this kingdom. They're a little bit of everything. Some are unicellular, most are unicellular, but some can be multicellular. They can be autotrophs or heterotrophs. And again, they're a little bit of everything. If a scientist can't quite figure out where to place an organism, they kind of toss it in the protist kingdom because they're a little bit of everything. Here you have an amoeba, a euglena, and paramecium. Again, a lot of them, or most of them, are single-celled. Then we have fungi. Most of these are multicellular, but some can be unicellular. They're all heterotrophs, which we know that means they get their food somewhere else. Some examples: mushrooms, mold, mildew, yeast. And most of these types of fungus get their energy or nutrients by absorbing it from dead or decaying matter. So you'll see mushrooms growing to the ground. I'm sure you've eaten mushrooms on a pizza. Here's some mold, and also that mildew that forms in the shower. Those are all examples of the fungi kingdom. We have the plant kingdom as well. Plants are all multicellular eukaryotes. They're autotrophs, which means the photosynthesis, they all make their own food. And some can produce flowers, and most of these will live on land. Lastly, we have animals, and this is the kingdom we belong. They are multicellular eukaryotes. Remember, they're all multicellular, and all our cells have a nucleus. We're all heterotrophs, which means we have to get our food somewhere else. And animals are very diverse. They can be found in almost every environment possible. We have a picture of Mr. McMichael, a picture of Mr. Kern, and a picture of Mr. Grimm. then you have here, this is Mrs. Snow.